Hey, what's up? It's Jake from Nimbus DevOps, and today I'm here to talk to you about one of my favorite things, and that's the Corsair Scimitar RGB Elite gaming mouse. I love this mouse. I'm currently using this mouse, and in the event that this mouse were to die or Corsair were to stop making one, I have an extra one that I keep in my desk. That's how much I love this mouse. Having said that, every time you need to take your right hand off of your keyboard, or if you're left-handed, your left hand off of your keyboard to use your mouse to click in a GUI, you're wasting time. And that is why we need to remember to use our terminal. And that's why we use the terminal. It's just faster, it's more efficient, it makes you more productive. So if you don't believe me, try it. Eventually, I hate using my mouse. When I'm working and I'm coding, I never ever use my mouse. I try never to use my mouse. When I'm gaming, oh man, I have everything key bound to my mouse, and I pretty much only use my mouse. And I try not to use my keyboard for speed. So it just depends on the goal, right? So once you get to a terminal, whether that's you can if you're on Windows, you can run Python in PowerShell by just typing Python. You can run the Windows terminal, which is really just running PowerShell, and you can run Python inside of here. I don't think I have any other environment set up as a brand new computer. I do. If you're in Ubuntu and you want to run Python, you can just type Python and see I didn't install it in Ubuntu yet. Um, and I could, if I wanted to, I could just do like a sudo apt get install Python 3. I don't know. It's already new. Oh, because I need to type Python 3. So you can type Python 3, and I'm running it in Ubuntu. So they're all the same, no matter where you run it. Um, and if you're like me and you do everything in VS Code, you can also just do it right here. So all you gotta do is type Python. If that doesn't work, try typing Python 3. There's little symlinks and things you can do with paths and environment variables. But as you can see here, I'm in a my app directory and my dev directory. I'm using my dev virtual environment right now. So everything I'm going to be doing is going to be applying to my dev virtual environment only, not to my actual computer. So let's talk about um, now that we're going to be using some kind of interface, and we're all going to be using the same one, console, in a terminal. What do we use Python for? So Python can be used for a couple things. Yes, you can write apps with it. You can make web apps. I talked about all the games and the software and all the stuff you can do. But the most common use for Python from most people that I talk to in my line of work is scripting. So what is the difference between scripting and programming an app? So an app is a very large piece of software that has multiple files, dozens, hundreds of files, dozens of libraries, whereas a script might have one or two libraries, and sometimes they don't even need a library, and maybe it just does something like clean out user session data from a web app or something like that, and people put them in cron jobs so that they can run regularly, like every night or once a week or whatever. Or you can even build apps. Like the difference between that and an app like Ansible. Ansible is written in Python, and Ansible modules that you run that could clean out a web server for session data. Maybe there's a module that does that, and it just uses Python to do that. It's just in a more user-friendly way. So Python is a very powerful scripting language, but it's not just a scripting language. It can do all kinds of things. We're going to start out really basic though, and just show you how to use an interactive shell. So you've heard me call this a console. You've heard me call it a terminal. You've heard me call it a couple things. Well, when you type Python and then you get these three uh, little caret guys right here, these greater than signs, right? Whatever you want to call them. These are this signifies that you are an interactive shell. Okay. Um, and you've seen me do this a couple times, and now you know, like, that's what it's called. So I activated my virtual environment, right? Because that's the first thing you do. You type Python, and now we're presented with these 3 lines, and you're in an interactive shell. So what we call these 3 little lines here, this is called a prompt. Okay, so much like you would log into a Linux computer or a server, and you would see like this little flashing cursor, right? That's your prompt. And if you're in a old DOS computer or Windows or whatever, you'd see something similar. That's your cursor. That's your prompt. It's a command prompt. Okay, and all this means is Python is just waiting for you to type something. That's all it means. So we can type something in here. So like, what's 2 plus 2? 4. What's 5 plus 12? 17. What is 6 divided by 4? 1.5. And so you can just do some very simple arithmetic operations, and it will turn back, it will return the answer just like you would do with the calculator. So if you're one of those people that's always opening calculator apps, if you have Python open, you can just do whatever you want inside of here, and it follows the same order of operations too. So you could do 3 times 5 plus 2, and you get 21. So it knows the order of operations. It follows them very strictly. It's not forgiving at all. But you can use this, and you can even be like 2, and then like the double star means an exponent, 2 to the 124th power, and it'll go ahead and tell you what that number is. So it's really powerful, it's super fast, and I bet your calculator can't do this. So this is pretty incredible. I mean, if you think about it, if you can raise 2 to the power of 1024 and you get something that fast. Now we went back into why learn Python versus, we looked at another really popular programming language, which is Java. I challenge you to find a simpler way to do 2 to the 1024th power in Java. It's a lot more complicated. It requires a lot more lines of code. And so one of the reasons that Python is both preferred for speed of productivity, because typing this takes 2 seconds, and also for learning is because it's fast because it takes 2 seconds to type this, but it's also really easy. It's easy for a person to understand. I can wrap my head around that. Really, all I have to learn is that this is telling me that there's an exponent. 2 to the 8th power is 256. You may not know this. You might, but there's a lot less to learn there than it would be required to perform the same calculation in a C++ or Java or something, C#. So you should use this every day. It's something you can do all the time. It's great for debugging. So if you have an app and you're like, why is this breaking? You can run parts of your code in it. You can check, hey, does this data structure work with this operation? You can run like a little piece of your code to see if it runs by itself before you try to put it all together with a bunch of other code. And if you use Django, which you saw me playing around with that, which is also something written in Python, uh, the interactive shell is coupled with it. So you can work your way through that whole framework and inspect the data and do all kinds of stuff. And I don't expect anybody to know that. Just know that uh, the interactive shell is extremely valuable and very useful, and it's something that you'll probably end up using every day. The other option is to use an IDE or an idle. And if we just Google this really quick, Python IDE, here are the choices. There's just a ton of them, right? And all this is, it's an integrated development environment, or idle integrated development learning environment. And PyCharm is super, super popular. A lot of people use that. But really, this is something that you're going to see in beginning level Python courses, and nobody uses this stuff. I mean, I guess that's not true. A lot of people use Atom, but nobody uses like this. When I say it's a beginner, nobody uses idle. Um, is there a picture? Yeah. So like that, it'd be like running your scripts in this little box, right? It doesn't look good. It's not really fast. You don't have a lot of options to track other things, and it's just intended for beginners. That's all. It doesn't have a huge set of capabilities or whatever. The bare bones interactive shell you get in the console, really anywhere you use it, doesn't have a lot of capabilities. And the recommendation for a lot of people is just to use interactive shell instead, because why use IDE when you can just type it in PowerShell or type it in a terminal or type it in VS Code? And so that's kind of where I'm going with that. Now, I personally will just tell you to install VS Code, not Visual Studio Code, the full thing, but just VS Code, the light one, the blue one, not the purple one, and um, and just run it from here. And you can open a terminal. There's a shortcut to open it. If you hold down Control and the tilde, that's the funny squiggly next to the number one, you can open and close the terminal like that. And you can have multiple terminals open. I've got Python open right here with PowerShell. I've got a Bash terminal right here. I could open JavaScript debug terminal. I could do a Windows subsystem for Linux and open an Ubuntu terminal. Like you can do all kinds of stuff. So it's very flexible, and I use it literally all day, every day. So that's pretty much it as far as just kind of introducing you to the interactive shell. So go ahead and try to activate your virtual environment, and then type Python to prompt you with the interactive shell, with the prompt. We learned that's a prompt. And just do a couple little uh, arithmetic calculations and see if um, you get it to work. You get any errors? Can you figure out how to solve the error? That kind of stuff. But we're really not doing anything crazy yet. It's just I want you to be familiar with the landscape and the ecosystem of everything that we're doing before we even get started with scripting anything, which is about to come up. So um, the last thing actually is, apart from running as a script, you can also, within the boundaries of shell, you can actually code it to run as an app, like as a service. So as I go through these videos, you're going to see me build stuff where um, we're going to be running things as a service, like either in the background or in the foreground or whatever. And it requires Python code to be organized a little bit differently, but don't worry about that. All you need to know is that you can run it here, or I can run it as an app, like, just like I run Chrome, or I run my Battle.net client, or OBS Studio, or Excel, and I just have these apps open. You can have apps that are open that are powered by your scripts, but you can also have them running in the background where you don't see them, and they're running as a service. So a couple different options, but the big takeaway here is just know that it's an extremely powerful scripting language if you choose to use it as such, and very flexible. And go ahead and get your hands dirty and have fun doing some interactive shell stuff.